Nuke ships with an alternative to traditional point-based tracking called the PlanarTracker. Let's take a quick look at the PlanarTracker and how we can use it to match move one image to another. So I'm going to hit Tab, start typing PlanarTracker, and drop a PlanarTracker. Now, in the newest versions of Nuke, the PlanarTracker is built into the Roto node because it exploits features of the Roto node in order to work. So they've just moved it all into the Roto node itself. When you first drop it down, it's pretty much ready to go, and we can start drawing the region that we would like to planar track. So I'm going to rock and roll through the plate here a little bit to see a good place to planar track. I want to stick the thing that I want to match move to this somewhere in here, or maybe even over here. So really I want to grab a region, a plane of this image that is around where the thing I want to match move on is going to be. So I'll just grab this whole region here by drawing a box around it. And then it's pretty much ready to go. I'll select the planar track layer here and then hit track forward, track to end. And Nuke will now make its best effort to track that plane to the end of the shot. Okay, so that took a couple minutes to track forward, moving from frame 140 to the end. And if you wanted to track going the other way, you could go to the reference frame here and then track to beginning. And I'm going to do this whole frame range, so we will now start from the reference frame and track to beginning, or track to start. Okay, that took a couple minutes, and it seems like Nuke did a pretty good job. But when you're using the planar tracker, you can constrain it to only attempt to track certain things. So these checkboxes up here will enable or disable the evaluation of translation, scale, rotation, shear, or perspective. As you can see, this is moving slightly in perspective, but it's primarily translation that it's tracking. I typically leave everything enabled on the first try, and then I will only disable things as necessary if the planar tracker fails. And this seems to be working pretty well. So now if we want to check the quality of this, we can use the grid overlay to see where it placed the grid. Now if I move back to the key frame, or the reference frame here, which you can do using this button, go to reference frame. This is the reference frame, the 0 frame that everything translates relative to from the planar tracker's perspective. I can also enable the ability to edit this plane. So right now, as you can see, the plane is that it's lined up, it's just kind of randomly placed. But if we wanted to orient this to line up with the wall somewhat, we can edit it here by enabling the planar surface and the ability to edit the planar surface. So I've turned on the visibility of the planar surface here, and now I am enabling the ability to edit it. And if you edit it on the reference frame, it will update throughout the entire clip range. So I'm just going to edit this plane to line it up with the wall. Depending on how you intend to use the planar tracker, this isn't strictly speaking necessary, but it does simplify things when you're trying to track in perspective, and it just makes it a little bit more intuitive sometimes to line it up with the plane that you intend to use it on. So that's the workflow that I'm using here. I'm going to line up my plane with the wall. And also, if you wanted to use it to stabilize the wall, to flatten it out, that's very useful as well. So now I'll rock and roll through my clip just to check quickly to see if it's working pretty well. It seems to work pretty well throughout the clip. So now another way to validate whether I've gotten a good result here is I can export a stabilize node. So I'm going to, you can do that one of two ways. You can use this menu here to export a stabilize or a corner pin, or you can go to the tracking tab in the roto node itself and create something. So I'm going to create a corner pin stabilized, and I'm just going to link the output, and we're going to use this to just check the quality of our track. We're going to stabilize our track around, stabilize the shot around our track and see if it sticks pretty well. So I'm just going to make a RAM player here, and we'll see how that goes. And that's looking pretty rock solid, which is a good indication that our track is rock solid, dead on. So this is excellent. This worked perfectly. So let's go about sticking our image to this. So I don't really need this corner pin stabilize anymore. It was just a tool to check my track. So I'm going to delete that. And now I'm going to export a corner pin relative. I like to do it with relative corner pins, but you can also do absolute. Let's look at the difference really quick. I'm going to export both a corner pin relative and a corner pin absolute. Here's my corner pin relative, and here's my corner pin absolute. And really the difference has to do with how Nuke sets up the from and to options of the corner pin. In one case, it's as if it's taking the image in its rest position here on the reference frame. Let's go to the reference frame here, and sticking it straight in to the scene. In the other case, because of the way it sets up the from and to, it will attempt to corner pin it in to that shape, into that corner pin on that frame. So I personally prefer the relative mode, because I will almost always use another corner pin above the match move to get it into just the right place in terms of how I want to place this. So let's quickly merge this over. We're going to use just an over merge to stick this over our shot, and we'll put this tracker off to the side. It's just a tool to store that for us, and we can see that my image is quite huge, and I would have probably, regardless of which one I'd used, if I'd used an absolute, I'm still going to have to position it into place anyway. So unless you have a properly formatted image going in that's exactly the right size, you're going to end up having to do a little bit of adjustment here. Now, you could do it in the corner pin node itself in absolute mode by editing the, or let's see, even in this mode by editing the from inputs if you like directly. You'd want to kill all of these keyframes. Or the easier way is to just drop down another corner pin node and use it to position the image where you want it. I'm going to hide everything here, and then I'm going to go and edit this. Oops, going to edit the 2 on that one, the 2 position, and put this one where I want it in frame using this corner pin upstream of my match move. And if you want to lasso multiple points, you can here. And I'm going to, just get this just where I want it in the shot. Usually it's best to do this on the keyframe or on the reference frame, just for the sake of consistency, even though this has no animation on it. It's apples to apples then, you know where you're working. And then maybe do a little bit of a grade here to make this look a little bit more present in the shot. And don't forget to turn on motion blur. Let's run this out. All right, so that looks pretty good. If you wanted to export points, you can do that via the tracker as well, tracker points. So this will create a tracker node, and it will export the corners of the planar track that you generated in PlanarTracker as regular 2D tracker points. So you could use this to do the various, export the various things that the tracker can export.